So our equation in this case will be if the sine of x is equal to a value, our ultimate question is to solve the cosine of 2x in terms of our a value. So what is our ultimate question in this case? We need to solve, or we need to approach. Well, it is going to be solve for a cosine of 2x, but in terms of our a value. As we can see through the values of cosine and our sine, this question is obviously going to be a trigonometric function problem. This question is going to be a trigonometric function problem. And as we can think about it in a lot of ways, there are totally two ways or things that we can apply trigonometric functions. And what is the first case? The first case will be to our graph, the trigonometric function graph. And what is the most important thing on our graph? Well, the most important thing on our graph is the form, as well as the equation that the function contains that can define the whole of them. And now let's think about the second case where I can apply a trigonometric function. What is the second place? Well, it will going to be a triangle, but what triangle especially? It will going to be a right triangle. What is the most important thing in our right triangle? Well, in the right triangle, the most important thing in this case will be the angle, because the angle is the one that actually defines the every single positions or the values in our triangle trigonometry. And what should we do? We always need to label every single size before we apply our trigonometric function problem. This is what it will look like when you apply our trigonometric function to the two cases. Now, how can you know if it is a graph problem or if it's a right triangle problem? Well, there are a few ways that we can think about it. So let's erase this for more spaces. Let's think about the first case about the right triangle. If you want to, if you think that it is a right triangle, there always should be an angle given, because the most important thing in our right triangle is our angle, and this is our angle that we need to know, which is our central angle form. And what it will look like when it's a question about the graph of our trigonometric function. Well, when it is a graph problem, they always need to give us the equation that contains the f of x and specific x value, including its own equation. So this is what the properties of each values will going to be. So let's say if you go back to our original question, our equation, there are two constant equations that are given. The first thing will be sine of our x is equal to a, but we are trying to solve for the cosine of our 2x is equal to a. Where is the f of x, or the x value? This x value in this case will be the main central angle that defines its central questions. So this question is basically going to be about not the graph, it's about the triangle. So this question is basically about the triangle, so I draw a triangle here, but it's especially going to be a right triangle. So if you want to see this as a right triangle, all you have to do is draw a small square form to show that it is a 90 degrees angle, and we need to have a specific central angles in our right triangle and set it, and then all we have to do in that case is to solve for the cosine of our 2x values. What is the first thing that we need to know? Well, we need to know what is the cosine, sine, and the tangent, which means we need to know the triangle trigonometry. So we need to know the triangle trigonometry or our trigonometric functions values. So let's get through it. So firstly, if you want to apply our triangle trigonometry values, if you want to apply our triangle trigonometry values, what is the first thing that we need? We're going to need a triangle, but it's partially going to be a right triangle. So let's simply get our right triangle from our graph and set or label every single side and angles we can possibly do. But this time we won't talk about the right triangle, we'll just go through it. Because we have talked about this in a lot of few videos. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you may go back to my previous videos and watch what they are. So there were totally 3 values. What was the first one? There was a sine of x. What is the sine of x? I mean, remember that every single trigonometric value should contain its central angle, which in this case is going to be our x degrees. And what was the definition of our sine of x degrees? Well, the definition of our sine of x degrees was opposite side of our central angle, which is going to be x in this case, and then all of them over our hypotenuse. And people might be confused what the hypotenuse is. Our hypotenuse is the longest side in our right triangle that can be defined, which is the opposite side of our right angle. This is what the sine of x will going to be. It's going to be, and let's think about the second one. What is the second one? Our second one will be our cosine of our x degrees. And what is the value of our cosine of our x degrees? Well, cosine of our x degrees will be adjacent side. It is the adjacent side over hypotenuse. And what is our hypotenuse again? Our hypotenuse will be the longest side in our right triangle. And from here, we'll be able to solve for the similarities between sine of x and the cosine of x. The similarities between them is that they share the hypotenuse. In the denominator. This is the main similarities between the sine of x and the cosine of our x degrees. Now let's think about the third one. The third one is a little bit different with our first one, and the second one will be tangent of our x degrees. The reason why we say that's different is because it doesn't contain hypotenuse in its fraction. What is the tangent of x? It will going to be adjacent side over our opposite side. This is the reason why sine and cosine is different with our tangent of x degrees. And from here, we might be able to simplify the tangent of x even more. The reason is because what is the adjacent side stands for? It stands for the cosine of x. What is the opposite side stands for? It stands for the sine of x. So our adjacent side over opposite side is also be sine. So it will be cosine of our x degrees over sine of our x degrees. This is what the tangent of our x degrees is going to be. So cosine of our x degrees divided by sine of our x degree, which is tangent of our x degrees. So these were the 3 triangle trigonometric values that can remind ourselves what was the properties and values of trigonometric function was look like. And let's go to the second thing. What is the second thing? It is the double angle formula in our triangle trigonometry. Now we are going to talk about definition of our double angle formula first, and why do we use our double angle formula in our trigonometric function, and when do we use it? Well, we use our double angle formula because they are the double angles. So the reason why they call it double angle formula is because they involve trigonometric function values such as sine, cosine, as well as tangent with double angles. So what does mean by this is we can actually apply our real question. And our real question in this case was to solve for our cosine of our 2x. They contain a double, which means times 2 in our main central angle, x. So we call these things double angle, and they have some specific patterns that we can apply to every single time. So they have so if you change a color for this, they have a specific pattern that we can apply to the double angles with the double angle trigonometric function, especially for our sine of 2x or cosine of 2x. So we talked about the sine of 2x. in the last video. If you don't know, you can go back. But in this case, we are trying to solve for a cosine of our 2x. But there are some things that we need to remember. They said in terms of our a value. What does in terms of a value means? Like in terms of something, let's say is a variable. In terms of variable, that stands for, that means the exact value that we're trying to solve is not given. So we gotta solve it in terms of that variable. What is a variable in this case? The variable in this case will be a. So let's actually get through this question. Let's make a straight line so that we don't get confused with these steps that we had to know in order to solve for this question. And we are also done with our third one, which is the signs of triangle trigonometry values on current plan. Not yet, but so this is what the double angle formula is going to be. So let's actually go through our equation. What was our equation again? So we are trying to solve for the cosine of our 2x. And what are the informations? If the sine of our x value is equal to a. This is our equation in this case. So let's remind ourselves what were the formulas. What were the formulas? Formulas for double angle. Let's get through our sine of x first, even though we have learned it in the last few previous videos. For a sine of our 2x degrees, it is going to be 2 times sine of x degrees times cosine of our x degrees. This is what it will turn like. If there was such a thing called sine of 2x, it can be translated as 2 times sine of x degrees times cosine of our x degrees. This is what we call as the sine of 2x degrees double angle formula. Sine of 2x degrees. Now let's go to the second one. What is the formula for the cosine of our 2x degrees? Well, the cosine of our 2x degrees is a little bit different. The cosine of 2x degrees is same thing with cosine of square x minus sine of square x, and that can be simplified as 2 times cosine square x minus 1, and that can also be simplified as 1 minus 2 times sine of square x. We call these transitions, or you can see these steps of our double angle, as the cosine of our 2x degrees. But our ultimate formula for this is 1 minus 2 times sine of square x. This is what the formulas for our double angle in our trigonometric function is going to look like. So, if you actually solve for our equation, it says cosine of our 2x. What was our cosine of our 2x is going to be? Well, it was going to be 1 minus 2 times sine of square x value. Now, what is given information? The given information is that the sine of x is a. What is the sine value in our cosine of 2x values? Well, the sine of x is somewhere inside the bracket, so we need to kind of simplify this bracket in order to know what the value inside is going to be. So the first thing will be 1 minus 2 times sine square x. So all we have to do is simplify this formula and input our value of our sine of square x form. But what is our a value that is given? It is our sine of our x value. So all we have to do is input our sin of x. So input our sine of our x value into our cosine of 2x, 1 minus 2 times sine of square x value, and get what is our values it will going to be. But we can't get exact value because it is just a question to solve in terms of our a value. So if we input our a value, which is sine of x, into here, instead of sine of x, we're inputting a value. So it will going to be is going to be cosine of our 2x is going to be 1 minus 2a squared. 1 minus 2a squared is our cosine of our 2x value, which is our final answer. So if you rewrite our answer, what was our answer? Our answer in this case was 1 minus 2a squared.